Welcome to the Church of the Living Godcast. Our prayer is that this message speaks to you, impacts you, and inspires you. Please enjoy today's message, and we invite you to contact us if you need prayer, appreciate this word, or would like more information on Church of the Living God. Be blessed today.
I told myself I would watch that beforehand, and I did, so that I wouldn't break down. It's still hard to watch. I've got a story to tell, and some of you all have followed our story on Facebook. We started a Facebook prayer group, and it just turned into something amazing, just an amazing army that you all have been to carry us through this situation. But I also understand that some of you may have absolutely no idea, really, what we've been through or what our story is. Or maybe if you've watched us to this point, you've maybe not heard it quite the way I'm going to tell it. The Lord moved on me because I'm more of a writer. It's so much easier for me to write my thoughts down and express myself that way and to hide behind a screen. But the Lord said, I'm calling you to tell your story. He said, I've put a word on you. I've given you something to tell, and you need to speak it. So while I feel incredibly insufficient because, the enemy tells me I'm not a speaker. You're not a speaker. What are you trying to do? He's called me, and so he's equipped me. And so I have a story to tell, and I hope that you will listen with your hearts, and I pray that anyone watching that you will listen, because it may not be exactly what you expect to hear out of this story. But the first thing that I want to go ahead and put out there is that was hard to watch, wasn't it? It's hard watching a child go through that. And one of the biggest stumbling blocks in people's faith when they're deciding whether or not they're going to serve God, whether or not they're going to buy into, does God exist? They ask themselves, if God exists, why do bad things happen? If God exists, why do children get cancer? If God exists, why do people die? Why do people suffer? If God exists, why did this thing happen to me? This terrible thing, fill in the blank, why did it happen to me? And so I want to address that first, because I don't want anyone to hear any part of this story and think that God brought this. Because the Bible says that only good and perfect things come from the Father. He did not give my daughter cancer, but he carried her through during and after her cancer. And the problem with the thought of if God exists, why do these things happen is that's the assumption that God's up there sitting back and putting a red light or a green light on everything that happens in your life. And that's not what he does. He created all of existence in a natural world. And I get dry mouth when I'm nervous, so excuse me. So think about this. If he wanted to dominate every part of your life, if he wanted to just sit up there and move every good thing and every bad thing, then why would he create mankind to have free will? If he wanted to dominate you and place every single situation in front of you, then why would he create you like that? Why would he give you a choice in all that you do? There's natural processes. The plants, when he created the earth, the plants can even spread their seeds and reproduce themselves. The earth, when you think about lava and when molten rock is created, it creates itself. He created this incredible masterminded plan for natural processes to happen. Not that he can't step in and intervene at any time, but his intention is for natural processes to take place. The animals can reproduce. The plants can reproduce. The earth beneath us can reproduce. It's a natural process where he does not need to put his hand in every single thing that we do in our lives. It's all part of free will. And so when bad things happen, that's not him saying, okay, I give permission for this bad thing to happen. It's a natural process. The word says that you will have trials and tribulations, but take heart. I've overcome the world. He did not say that you will never go through fire. He never said it. It's not true. And it's a lie of the enemy when you go through fire and you say, where is God? God didn't bring you the fire, but he promised. He promised that he would hold you through that fire. All right, so that's just an intro. I had to put that out there because it's so important to me that you don't see those pictures. See my little girl and think, why would God do this? I want you to see my little girl and think, wow, what God did with this child. That's what I want you to see. Okay, so Matt actually helped me introduce myself a little bit. So I just want to give you an idea of who I am. I was saved at 11, came to the church here, and have been attending since I was about 14, 15 years old. So I was raised in church, was raised to know who God is, which was important in this journey, but I still learned a lot in this journey that I didn't learn before. So being raised here on a foundation of faith, I know things about God. I know he's going to be there with me. I know he's going to protect me. I know that he is so many awesome things that I know. And I stood on that. And we're going to get there. But as Matt also said, Leora and Avery and Brennan, my children, are miracles. Because we prayed for children. We were not able to conceive. And Leora is a shining example of how medicine and God can work together to create miracles. Because after lots and lots of failed fertility treatments, we did in vitro fertilization. We lost 5 embryos in the process. And Leora was our survivor. She's a survivor. She's always been a survivor. And I call Leora our buy one, get 2 free deal. Because Avery and Brennan were freebies after that. God healed the issue. And we now have 3 amazing children. So there's been a promise over her life before she was ever born. She's promised. She has a purpose. We all do. Okay, so her very name, just a side note, is Light of Victory. Leora Nicole means Light of Victory, victory over fertility. That's what we thought. But that's carried us through. It means a lot more now than just victory over fertility. God knew what was in the naming process. When we were naming our daughter, we didn't even know that it wasn't just about victory over fertility. It was a victory over so many other things. All right, so there's the pre-story. And I'm going to get into the meat of what happened. So we've been churchgoers our whole life. You saw pictures of little Leora. She's been watching Maranatha, our dance team, since she could barely just walk and toddle. She'd try to do the moves with them, watching them in the back there. Been raised in worship here. I was a part of Maranatha team. I can't dance anything like I used to. Not even close. You get older and that happens. But we've been raised in a house of worship. And so she's been familiar with the atmosphere of worship and expressing worship. And so it wasn't foreign to her when things got rocky and they got rough. It wasn't foreign territory to welcome the presence of God into our situation. So last May, we were all in quarantine and really, really missing people and really, really missing church because church was closed down. And during that time, Leora started throwing up, at first here and there. That's normal, right? Kids get sick all the time. They're walking petri dishes. So it got to a point, though, where one night she threw up almost 30 times. And I gave her Finagrin, I gave her Zofran, and nothing would even touch it. And as a mom, you try not to overreact, but I just had a feeling like this isn't right. If it's a stomach bug, then Finagrin would work. Finagrin knocks you out. It's like you sleep through it, so you can't throw up. And it didn't even touch her. And so we took her to the pediatrician's office. They said, you know what? It's got to be a virus. We've got to run its course. And so they gave her fluids and sent her on her way. And then by that Saturday, a few days later, she started vomiting again and complaining of very severe abdominal pain. And the next day was Mother's Day, and I spent the night before up with her, holding her little hair back, and she was throwing up so violently. I don't even know how she had the energy to even stand up after that. But I took her to the ER because I just knew that it's not a virus. This doesn't make sense. I had no idea it would be what it turned out to be, but I just thought it was more. And so I woke up Mother's Day morning. I told Brent he had to stay home with the other kids. And I said, you know what, I just got to get her checked out, make sure it's nothing serious. I'm sure we'll be right back home. I wish we were right back home. I wish with everything in me we were right back home. So they did scans, x-ray, lab work, came back clear, but they saw a spot on her colon that they thought was an intussusception. And an intussusception is where your colon kind of kaleidoscopes in on itself, and it's extremely painful. And they consider that a medical emergency. And so they tried to do conservative measures to fix it, to get it to straighten back out, but for some reason it wouldn't work. They couldn't get that spot to spread out like it should have. And so they said, we're going to do a quick surgery. It's laparoscopic. You'll probably be home in just a day or two. We can take care of this. It's not uncommon. They said this is an emergency procedure, but it's common. It's okay. So I'm at the hospital alone, reassuring Brent, who's home with the other two kids. You know, it's okay. They said it's not that serious. It's okay. We'll be home in a couple days. I was in the surgical waiting room, and they were taking a lot longer than expected. And you try not to overreact. I mean, I really try to talk myself down, like, keep your cool. She's fine. She's fine. They know what they're doing. It's not a big deal. I'm sure everything's fine. They bring me back into the room where they tell you how everything goes. And it felt daunting because I've heard about the room, but I've never been in the room before. We've not had anyone close in our family go through something like this. And so I was alone when we got the news because we didn't know we would be getting news. And the surgeon started talking about how the surgery started. And then he started talking about what he found. And when a doctor says, what I found, you don't want to hear anymore after that. You kind of want to rewind and go a different route. Like, no, I'm not listening to anymore. He had found a tumor. He was careful not to call it a tumor because even though it looks like cancer, they're not allowed to call it cancer until it goes through all of the pathology tests. So he called it a mass. He said, I found a mass that looks a lot like Burkitt's lymphoma. I've seen it once before, and the child's now gone off to college. They're okay. They made it through okay. So there's a lot of hope with chemotherapy. And he said, chemotherapy? I was like, hold up. We came to the ER for a quick trip. Chemotherapy? I said, no, you're wrong. In my mind, I didn't say it to him. It was like, we're not going to go that route. It's not going to happen. Because I serve a God who's a healer. I've served him since I was a child. I've seen miracles after miracle. He's a healer. And so since they couldn't tell me definitively that it was cancer, I grabbed a hold of that. I said, all right, you can't tell me. Before your tests come back, it's going to be benign. She is not going to have cancer. And I stood on that, and so many of you helped me stand on that. Oh, it was one of the hardest I've ever fought spiritually. So they admit her because the doctor said that he said, I'm pretty sure this is Burkitt's lymphoma. But we have 2 to 3 days to go through multiple layers of testing to confirm if it's benign or if it's cancerous. And each day they would come back and say, this layer of testing is back and we're pretty sure it's cancer. And I hung on to that. It's like, you're pretty sure, but you don't know. You do not know. So God can turn this around. He can do it. You don't know. I didn't want to accept it. And, there's nothing wrong with, until you get the firm bad news, there's nothing wrong with claiming it before you know it's the truth. Why would I speak cancer over her until I had to? And so I clung to that. And even on day 3, they said, we're 90% sure. We're just waiting on one other little thing. We're 90% sure it's cancer, and we're going to go ahead and schedule her to have her port installed to get her chemotherapy. And even then, I said 90% is not 100%. You're not sure. God's going to turn it around. And so as you can see, with all the lovely images there, it was cancer. And so we had that. Yeah, there we go. So this is one of her very first PET scans. And if you look at the yellow spots all around her liver, you can't see the color very well, and around her bowel, it's cancer. She was jumping and running and playing for months, and this was growing inside of her. That's terrifying as a parent. Terrifying. So once they confirmed it was cancer, they said, okay, we've got to figure out, how bad is it? How bad is the cancer? And so I was like, okay, God's still got us. God's got this. I said that on every post, God's got this, because I knew that no matter how bad it got, he would still have us. And so we went on to praying, okay, there's no cancer anywhere else. They found a tumor, but there's no more. There was more. That's the liver. And during her ultrasound, I remember counting the lesions, the cancerous lesions, trying to see how many there were, and I lost count at around 13 or 14. And I was just like, I can't count anymore. I can't look. And so the last test they had to really determine how bad the damage was her bone marrow biopsy. So the same day that they scheduled her port to be installed. If you don't know what a port is, it's like an IV, but it's kind of permanent. They surgically install it to where it threads directly into the vena cava, directly into the heart. So they don't have to get stuck in the arm again and again and again and again for this chemo. They can just inject it pretty much straight into their heart. So that's a port. 3 days after I took my daughter to the ER for vomiting, she's having a port installed into her heart where poisonous chemotherapy is going to be pumped into her veins. This was a whirlwind of a week, and it wasn't even over yet. So for that procedure, they put the port in, and they did a bone marrow extraction. They get it from the hips, and you can imagine how deep they have to go to get the bone marrow. She's had so many bone marrow extractions. They tested the bone marrow, and they sat us down when they got the results, because previously they told us when they tested the tumor, they said it's Burkitt's lymphoma. But when they got the bone marrow results, they showed me a chart of the stages of cancer, stage 1, 2, 3, 4. They said if there's a bone marrow concentration rate of 25% or below, then it's in one of these lower stages. But if it's over 25%, it's stage 4 cancer. She was at 50% bone marrow consumption. Her bones were literally being eaten up with cancer. 50% of her cells were cancerous. So you can imagine, as someone who has been raised in the house of God, who knows him, still knows that he's a healer, but everything I'm praying is going the opposite of what I'm saying. It's like, God, it's not going to be cancer. God, it's not going to be anywhere else. It's all over her liver. It's in her bones. It was such a difficult season. After her first couple of rounds of chemo, they did a repeat ultrasound of her liver to see if there was any change in all those adhesions that you see, all those yellow spots in her liver in the top left there. And they were hoping to see some sort of shrinkage, but there was no change at all, which they said, that's not terrible because at least it hasn't grown. So that was after her first couple of rounds, but they also did another bone marrow biopsy to see if it was the same as the liver with no change. So after her first 2 rounds of chemo, her bone marrow consumption went from 50% to 70% consumption of cancer. After 2 rounds of chemo. God, what are you doing? What are you doing? I know you're a healer. Why are you not healing my daughter? I know you can do it. I know you can do it. But why aren't you doing it for me? And I broke before him. Watching her go through the chemo is hard enough. And on top of that, you have guilt because you feel like your faith is weak. And so what I did, instead of running away saying, my faith is weak, I ran closer and I said, God, my faith is weak. God, I feel weak. I need you to increase my faith. I need you. I said, God, I can't survive losing her. I can't survive it. And when I said that, it's like something clicked in my spirit. I was desperate for a healing. Desperate. There's no one more desperate than a mama praying for her sick kid. I mean, there's just nothing like it. I was praying and desperate for a healing, but I wasn't desperate for the healer. The healer. What are we really desperate for when we need a breakthrough? Is all of our faith in the breakthrough or the breakthrough giver? Because if it's in the breakthrough giver, then no matter whether or not you get your breakthrough, you have victory. And so I misplaced my desperation. I misplaced my faith. My faith was in my faith. Lord, help me. Because we're taught as Christians that if you believe anything, it will happen. It'll happen. You believe it, you have enough faith, it'll happen. The problem with that is nowhere in the Bible does it say you will not have trials and tribulations. It says you will have trials and tribulations. That doesn't mean you don't push in for your miracle. You absolutely do, because the Bible's full of miracles. He's faithful. But his character is faithful. If he doesn't meet your every single solitary need, he still has you. But you have to be in his hand. You have to seek his hand, not what his hands do, his hand. So that's when things started to change in me. So things are going bad. Cancer, it's spreading. It's consuming her bone marrow. The chemo's not working. She's suffering. The chemo's almost killing her itself. Chemo is brutal, and it's not even working. And God held me, and he held her during that time. Our prayers were not answered the way that we wanted to in that moment, but we drew closer to him. And in that same season, I told you chemo's brutal. It kills all the good cells, too. So while it's looking for all the cancerous cells, it also completely, literally zeroes out all your white blood cells, your hemoglobin, your platelets. You cannot heal. And so we were going through that, okay, so you're going to wipe her out. Now, what if something happens? Well, what if you've just had a surgery? What if you've just had a surgery where they cut you open and pulled out a tumor and sewed you back up, and then you take away all the white blood cells that are supposed to heal her? Her incision broke down from that surgery. And she was throwing up from the chemo, and I'm sorry this is graphic, but it was graphic. You need to know how hot the fire was. That's why I got to tell you this. So the incision broke down. She and I were alone in the room, and she was throwing up from the chemo. And I hear her say, "Mommy, what's that?" And her bowels had abrupted through her incision. And each time she threw up, it more and more came. And I know that's graphic. But again, you need to know where we're coming from. All this has happened while I'm drawing closer to God, because our mindset is if we're drawing closer to God, everything should be peachy, right? Everything should be roses and daisies, and nothing's going to go wrong, and you can just run in the sunshine and never have a problem. But that's not what he promised, but he promised to have us, to hold us. And so we went through that. They rushed her into emergency surgery to repair, to put the bowel back in. But they set us down. They said, "We don't know if she'll be able to heal from this." Because it had been several weeks since her first surgery, and that incision didn't even heal. They prepared us. They said, "There's a chance after we sew her up that it might come back open. She may not heal from this. We might have to leave her open." Terrifying. Absolutely terrifying. So we prayed, we worried. Just because we don't get the biggest victory we need doesn't mean that we can't still seek other victories along the way. And so we prayed, okay, we get that it's cancer. We're going to get to the other side. Okay, she needs to heal. So we're going to pray, God, where there's no white blood cells, where she shouldn't be able to heal, God, heal that incision. Put it together in a supernatural way. Piece her together. And so a few days later, they had a wound vac on to give her every shot to try to keep all that together. And they prepared us. They put her under general anesthesia to take off the wound vac because they were so afraid that when they took it off that she'd still be open underneath. So they did that, and we were waiting for them to come out to hear the words. When the surgeon came out, he said, "She is beautifully healed." Beautifully healed was his exact words. And sometimes it just takes a little victory, just a little one, to give you some more faith, a bigger increase of faith. And man, what a miracle. No white blood cells, no platelets. And her incision looked better than it did before it came open. It was amazing. She still has the cutest little belly. It's adorable, but anyway. So we're starting to see some little victories there. So when I approached him in the beginning, I approached him like this. When everything was going wrong, I was saying, "God, I need you to do this. I need this. God, right here, I need you to do this." And what he showed me, I changed it to, "God, I need you. I don't need you to fill my hand with something I need you to do. I need you, because you are the only thing that's going to keep me through all of the terrible circumstances that life may come. If you do this one miracle and I'll go on throughout the rest of my life, what am I going to do when the next problem happens? Expect you to fix it every time? That's not faith in him. That's not trust in him. That's just wanting his works. It's not wanting the work doer. And what I have learned, what I have grown to understand, is that the kind of faith that holds the most power is uncircumstantial faith. It's faith that is not shaken by what we see in the natural. Sometimes things don't happen the way we want them to. But he's still God, and he's still good. And one of the biggest lies of the enemy is that he's not good. If he was good, why would this happen to you? It's a lie, and so many people are believing that lie, and they're completely living a life of heartache and misery because they're either, if they believe for something and it doesn't happen the way they need it to, in the end, they either end up hating God for not answering the miracle, or they hate themselves. I wasn't enough, Lord. I didn't have enough faith. I didn't earn my miracle. I didn't deserve it anyway. I don't deserve God. And they walk away. And as a part of this cancer community, man, I've met some amazing people of faith. And I've seen some amazing, amazing kids with the most on-fire parents. Some of them been healed, and some of them don't get their healing. But God's still good. We live in a natural life. We can't expect to not have natural situations in a natural life. Uncircumstantial faith. So when you are in the middle of the fire, man, I love that song. That song goes back a long way for our family. When you're in the middle of the fire, you have a couple of choices. You can keep yelling at God to take that fire away. God, take the fire away. I'm in the fire. Take it away. Take it away. You can just shrivel up on the ground. Just let the fire consume you. There's no use in fighting it anyway. I'm in the fire. You can curse God. Like, God, this is your fault. I'm in a fire. It's your fault. But does that get you out of the fire? No. It just makes you bitter. Bitterness is a poison. Or here's an alternative. When you're in the fire and the flames are all around you, you can look at the fire and watch them just burning away pieces of your life. Or you can turn around to the person standing next to you in the fire. He's with you in the fire. Like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. You can focus on the fire, or you can grab a hold with everything you have of the person who's in the fire with you. He said that he can bring you out of the fire not even smelling like smoke. But you have to turn to him. It doesn't do you any good if you got your back to him and you're just cursing those flames. The answer's right next to you. So that's what I learned through this. And as God was working on me, and I tell you, we lived in that hospital. Initially, we didn't go home for over 2 months at all. She lived in the hospital for 2 months and 1 day. Then we went home for a few days. And if you are a chemo family, you understand that you don't get to stay home very long because you get a fever because of the lack of blood cells, and you go right back to the emergency room. So we essentially lived at the hospital for about 6 months. And, man, God met us there. God met us there. I've been a part of some amazing services, amazing, tangible presence of God services, and I have never felt him like I felt him on a hospital floor bathroom with my daughter in the other room, hooked up to every machine imaginable. I felt God like I've never felt him before. He was holding me in the fire. So the first miracle that God did, the first miracle he did in this situation, of course, it was the incision healing, but the first true transformation wasn't in her, it was in me. And that's the biggest part of my testimony today. It's that he transformed me through the fire because I shifted my focus from the fire to my protector. And I stopped having circumstantial faith. So let's go back to the medical words here. So she had more chemo. We know the cancer spread, right? First 2 rounds of chemo. Didn't work. First, there was no change, and then it spread. What's chemo for if it's not going to kill the cancer? The doctors got a little bit more uncomfortable when they saw it go from 50% to 70% bone marrow consumption. I could see them just buckling down like, whoa. This isn't getting good. What we're doing is not working. So they scheduled another set of scans. And again, what's transpired between the last set of scans where the cancer grew and this set of scans, what changed was my perception. What changed was where I focused my energy during the battle. I no longer felt like I had to have my miracle to survive. I couldn't bear to think about losing her. But I shifted my focus on the miracle worker instead of the miracle. So that's what changed. And so she got her next set of scans. And again, they're hoping, let there be no change, no growth, no spreading. They said, please, just let there not be any spreading. Can you show the next picture? It was gone. It was gone. Absolutely no trace of the cancer was in her body. None in her liver, none in her colon. They tested her bone marrow. It was as clean as could be. And so here's what I want you to get out of this. Man, first of all, He is a miracle-working God. But second of all, I want you to understand how He operates in your life. Because you can assume that every puzzle piece of your life is hand put there by God. Here's this pretty piece. Here's an ugly piece. Here's a broken, jagged piece. There's a black piece. We'll mix those in with the pretty pieces and just see what happens. He doesn't originate all the pieces. He doesn't lay down puzzle pieces in your life. But the pieces that are dealt to you, the pieces you wind up having, if you give them to Him, again, He didn't give the pieces, but if you just give them to Him, He can arrange the pieces into the most beautiful work of art. The good pieces, the bad pieces, the broken pieces, the dark pieces. But we have to give them to Him. And so the scripture that says that He is for us, not against us, and He says that He will work all things together for our good. That doesn't mean He's going to send cancer to your 6-year-old daughter because it's going to make you stronger. I'm sorry, that's not what I walked. That's not what I saw. It means if cancer should take a hold of your 6-year-old daughter, I will take that and I will weave it into your story and I will create a purpose around it for your good. And so no matter what you're going through, no matter how tough the battle is, understand He didn't give you the battle, but He will make that battle work for you. You'll have a victory one way or another. If you have uncircumstantial faith, you have a victory no matter what. And that's my message. The healing is undoubtedly a healing. But the first miracle, which may have had a lot to do with the healing, was uncircumstantial faith. So, I can't promise, and this is hard, I can't promise that you will get every single thing that you feel like you desperately need from Him. But I can promise that He will give you what you truly need from Him. Because our perspective of what we need and His is very, very different. And so, if you're someone who's needing a miracle like this, if you're like me and you're saying, I cannot survive unless this miracle happens, I was there. I was right there. Say, God, you're not doing my miracle. I'm praying and you're not doing what I'm asking you for. Again and again and again. It didn't happen for us like that. My prayer was that it would not be cancer. I didn't want her to have to walk this journey. It happened. But He's creating something amazing out of it. He didn't bring it, but He's creating an amazing story with these broken pieces. So my message, it's yes, press in for your miracles because He's a miracle-working God. But more than that, press into Him. Press into Him. Because what He does is eternal. It's not just a temporary fix for a temporary problem. It's eternal. And that's where you want your faith to be.
Thank you for listening to today's Church of the Living Godcast. We trust and pray that you were blessed by today's word. If you'd like to contact us for prayer or for more information about Church of the Living God, please visit our Facebook page at Win City COLG or give us a call at 859-745-1865.